Welcome to Melbourne, Australia, the main hub of Jetstar Airlines, the low-cost cousin of Qantas. More importantly, however, welcome back to my series titled The Ones, where we have the goal to get on each airline's flight number 1 and look into its significance. It's been a little while. Today's flight number 1 is Jetstar's flight number 1 from their main hub in Melbourne, halfway across the Pacific to Honolulu, Hawaii, in the United States. We'll be flying in their business class cabin and trying out what their long-haul, low-cost business class product is like. Hop on board with me. Let's go. The check-in for this flight is separated from other Jetstar flights just because the US-bound flights need an extra document check. The desks open 3 hours before the scheduled departure, but we were delayed a little today. Like 2.5 hours delayed a little. So we couldn't check in until they brought over some vouchers for us, so we queued in the meantime, and eventually they completed the document checks while we waited for the check-in counters to open. After checking bags, the outbound security and immigration was right around the corner, and thanks to my biometric passport, the lines were significantly shorter, and I got through it all in about 10 minutes. Then through the duty-free store and down the winding hallway of expensive shops, we eventually reached the gates. There are two main groups of gates here in the international terminal at Melbourne. This first rotunda that we come across, and then our gate, which is way down the hallway and the end of a long stretch of gates. In this first grouping of gates, we find the lounges. There's quite a few lounges for first and business class passengers of a whole load of airlines. Since Jetstar is a Qantas subsidiary, business class passengers get access to the Qantas Business Class Lounge here in Melbourne. Kind of. When booking, you'll notice two categories of business class. Since I booked through a travel agency site, I did not realize this. Essentially, the lower cost includes the onboard business class product. The higher fare includes lounge access and refundable tickets and all that kind of stuff. I, unfortunately, did not have lounge access level of fare. But you can see here some footage I've taken of this lounge for those of you curious what's included if you are contemplating the higher business class tier. Not a bad space, plenty of food and showers, just not for us today. Not for you either if you don't want to pay an extra couple $100 US. Fortunately, our flight was delayed. Usually that's a bad thing, but Jetstar managed this delay super well, giving all passengers $30 worth of vouchers to spend around the airport, so we would at least get fed without having to spend unnecessary money. So we took the long stroll down the hallway out to the second set of gates where we get some good views of other aircraft on the ramp here, pretty much stuff heading to every continent of the globe. And then we got to gate 18, which will be ours today. As a matter of fact, our aircraft was just being towed in. Say hello to the 10-year-old 787-8 that will be taking us to the tropical vacation spot. Eventually, we boarded. They board back to front, which really truly makes sense when you think about it, and then business class passengers can board at any time. As we head down the jet bridge, one last reminder that this is a low-cost carrier, not a full-fare carrier, so it's definitely not the best thing you'll find, but we'll talk more about that with the cost in comparison later on. On that warning, welcome aboard the business class cabin of Jetstar Airlines. In a 232 configuration, it looks a bit more like premium economy found on most airlines. The 3-row cabin allows for 21 seats in business class, and because of the setup, it allows for a maximum capacity sort of configuration on this airplane, like a true low-cost carrier. After enjoying some shots of the empty cabin for a minute or two, it's time to look at these seats. The headrest is not the softest thing in the world, but it is fully adjustable. The seat itself is plenty wide, but just like the headrest, it's pretty hard. There's also a leg rest that can fold out as well as a footrest that can fold out from that. Above that is the windows, or window in my case, as this unique cabin setup only allows for one window in the first row. Along that window side there's an armrest. The armrest also opens up and stores the TV, which we could pull out in flight but had to be stowed for taxi, takeoff, and landing. And on the front of that armrest is where we find the remote for the TV. In row 1 I had the bulkhead in front of me, which was nice, it allowed me some good leg room, but I had to store all my stuff in the overhead bin for taxi takeoff and landing. Big time love, however, to those overhead air vents. On the front of the center console you'll find the remote for your seatmate's TV, in addition to 2 USB and 2 universal charging ports. The armrest on this side also opens up. This one is what stores your tray table, and it slams shut. I cannot tell you the amount of times I accidentally let it slam shut in the middle of the night while everyone else was trying to sleep. And lastly, the inside of that armrest featured the seat adjustments and the headset plug. As for the amenities, we were given a water bottle at each seat in addition to the pre-departure beverage choices. The headphones we got were the same as United's Polaris headphones. They're noise cancelling, but they're not the comfiest. Bedding was minimal. We had this one pillow. It was fairly small. It was good for lumbar support and not much else. And then we got this little throw blanket. It was fuzzy, but it's about as thin as it comes. Now, anyone can purchase these amenity kits, but if you're in business class, you get it for free. It comes with some of the normal things like socks, eye mask, dental kit, and lotion. However, I was super excited to see that it came with an inflatable neck pillow. I didn't end up using it, but I did save it for later, in addition to this lip balm that seems to have rolled out of frame in that last shot. Lastly, the amenity kit came in a tote bag, so we could reuse it later. For those of you who are new to this series, there's a specific reason I chose to set out on this mission. Flight number 1 for an airline typically is a very important route for the airline. For some carriers, it holds a historical significance, like Southwest Airlines' flight number 1 from Dallas to Houston to Corpus Christi, celebrating their first ever route. Other airlines choose it to be their most popular or their flagship route. Take American Airlines flight number 1, for example, which operates from New York to Los Angeles. For other airlines, it's just assigned to a flight that marks a milestone for the airline, like United Airlines flight number 1 from San Francisco to Singapore, which was given that flight number since it was the first non-stop service between these two very connected cities, and also was the longest flight they'd ever operated at the time. All those mentioned routes are up in the playlist on my channel with my previous videos in the series. But now we gotta take a look at why this flight was assigned Jetstar's prestigious number 1. We don't have any concrete evidence pointing us to the answer, but there are a few reasons this route holds so much importance, and we can make our best guess from there, and I'll leave it up to y'all in the comments to add your 2 cents on the topic, or even better, if any of you know why. For starters, Jetstar's service to Honolulu was announced in 2006. They actually announced it at the same time that they would be starting service from both Sydney and Melbourne to Honolulu. This would be the first and only flight for Jetstar to the United States. Immediately, this flight became their longest flight. At the current moment, it's actually the longest flight out of the Honolulu airport as well. There's 4 flights out of Honolulu that are over 5,000 miles. First is Honolulu to Sydney, which is served by Jetstar as well. Also Qantas, but Hawaiian Airlines still sells the most seats on this route. The next longest is Honolulu to Boston, which is also the longest domestic flight in the US. Hawaiian has served this route for quite some time, and now Delta has announced they too will operate this route. Just crazy to think a domestic route is longer than Honolulu to Sydney. Next longest is Philippine Airlines' route from Honolulu to Manila, and then this flight, Honolulu to Melbourne, on Jetstar, is the longest flight out of Honolulu Airport. So essentially, due to it being the longest flight in Jetstar's history as well as for the Honolulu Airport, in addition to this route being the first ever American flight for the airline, I would say that all contributes to them assigning the flight number 1 tag to this flight. As a matter of fact, the return to Melbourne is flight number 2, and then Sydney to Honolulu is Jetstar 3. Leading me to believe that they placed the importance on the destination, but Melbourne got number 1 just due to it being their main hub. Let me know if you agree or if you have other thoughts. Now, I'm returning to my home country in this video, but that doesn't mean my IP address has to if I'm using the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN. Now, NordVPN allows you to add a layer of protection between you and people with malicious intent on the internet. By connecting to one of their servers around the globe, you're sending your internet traffic through their encrypted servers, making it harder for people to access your data. And with one of the largest server networks of VPN providers, you can really customize your internet experience, no matter whether you're trying to find search results in another country, see lower flight fares, or access different content libraries. NordVPN has some great perks as well, such as their user-friendly apps across devices, allowing you to stay safe across all different types of platforms. And in my experience, they have some of the fastest speeds when connected to a VPN, at least when comparing to other VPN providers. Not only have I enjoyed using NordVPN, but we can see similar trends if we look at the reviews of theirs online. People seem to really like the speeds when using NordVPN, and they seem to enjoy streaming content from around the globe. With all that, they also seem to be retaining long-term customers, with most people having used them for multiple years, which speaks volumes. To get your internet connection secured and to enjoy the perks we talked about, use my link down below, nordvpn.com/PatrickShea, and you can get 4 free months when you purchase a 2-year plan with them. And with a 30-day money-back guarantee, you've got enough time to make sure that their services work for you. Now back down under. Now just before takeoff, they also wanted to take our breakfast orders, so we were passed out 2 separate menus, one for the dinner menu and one for the breakfast menu. On the backside was the drinks, although they were the same. As far as the in-flight entertainment goes, you can see some of the normal options. The movies had some familiar categories, but when scrolling through some of the favorites, you'll see that there's quite a few good options here. The only problem is that this somewhat ancient screen wasn't as responsive to the touch as I would have liked. There was an interesting selection of TV shows, definitely not any of my normal go-to shows, however the shows they did have at least had full seasons. Then it goes through the music categories and a slew of games. Then the information tab, which first off had some videos to keep you healthy on these flights. Then it had videos about the cabin as a whole, and lastly it had the in-flight maps, which weren't adjustable but instead auto-played through a series of slides. Unfortunately, there is no in-flight Wi-Fi on Jetstar's fleet, although it does sound like that might be coming in the future with a fleet revamp to their long-haul cabins. Immediately after the flight attendants were able to stand up, they brought us our pre-ordered drinks and some pretzels. I chose to go with the spiced chai, and I'm not kidding when I say it was one of the best things I've ever drank on an airplane. Now, all of Jetstar's meals were a single tray service. You're looking here at the lamb shank main course option, a slow braised lamb shank with mashed potatoes, broccoli, peas, and minted onion sauce. Honestly, that lamb fell right off the bone. And you know that we aren't skipping past that engraved silverware, peeping that Jetstar logo. Not long after the meal, we passed Sydney, meaning that it was officially a trans-Pacific flight, as we wouldn't see land until Hawaii other than a few random specks of islands along the way. Also, just because I had this thought mid-sentence, does it still count as a trans-Pacific flight if we only make it halfway and then land? Do we want to rename that? Let me know what you think while I set up my bed for sleep. Or whatever you want to call this thing, since it's more of a premium economy style recliner, definitely not lie flat, but let's see what our sleep situation will look like here. Now we gotta take this somewhat normal looking airplane seat and make it into something comfy enough for some good sleep. To do that, we're gonna use the buttons on the inside of the armrest. One controls the seat back, one controls the leg rest. And here you can see what this bed turns into, or whatever you want to call it, because it's definitely not a bed. You'll see the maximum recline along with that leg rest that comes up. It's definitely better than your average economy seat, maybe not quite as good as your average premium economy seat, but it's definitely nowhere near your average business class seat. That being said, especially with a window seat, you could lean up against that, and I had no problem sleeping here for about 3 to 4 hours. Using the bedding, we do have this pillow. Doesn't really sit in spot until I'm there holding it in place. Then we can put the blanket down. Once again, it kind of just sits over your lap. It's not big enough to cover your whole body. Fortunately, the guy next to me didn't show up, and so I had 2 blankets. To make yourself a little more comfortable, you can push that little orange button on the right side. That extends out this little footrest, which then you can click up and set into a number of detents. Personally, I was a little too tall for this thing, something I've never said in my life. All in all, it's not the best place to sleep if you're talking business class, but definitely better than economy. Personally, I can't justify the extra cost as I feel like the leg rest really didn't do all that much, so you're just getting some better recline. That being said, I'm going to try and get some sleep, and I'll see y'all soon. I woke up to a good sight of the moon, got some work done, and eventually I got a little bit hungry, so I decided to go to the galley and see what kind of mid-flight snacks they had available, since there wasn't any official listings of mid-flight snacks. And I do give Jetstar major props for their mid-flight snacks. Some airlines just give you some crackers, some airlines have nothing. Jetstar actually had a whole menu of sweet and savory items. Kinda looks like normal paid items on most flights, but we got our pick entirely for free. Maybe not the stuff on the back, but of the food options at least. I could have gone wild, but chose to keep it simple, just got some popcorn, chocolate, coconut thing, and a coffee. We were about 4 hours from Honolulu when we crossed the international date line. At the time, the sun was still down, and it was still storming outside, so every once in a while, that random strobe and beacon of the aircraft bouncing off the clouds definitely caught me off guard more than once. Now maybe I was just tired, but trying to get back out of this bathroom, that door was like a Rubik's Cube. I just could not get it to pivot. The bathroom itself was fairly boring, however we did have a little bit of amenities in the form of the wet wipes and hand sanitizer. Admittedly, I was super happy about them not locking the windows in flight. It meant that I could enjoy the sunrise a bit when we were about an hour and a half outside of Honolulu. Since it takes a while to go to bright and then back to dim, it's usually tough on these airplanes, but the sunrise was actually timed out pretty well. The lights came up for breakfast at about the same time, so it worked out pretty well and I wasn't blinding anyone trying to look at the sunrise. Mid-sunrise, however, it was breakfast time. We were originally supposed to land in Honolulu ungodly early, but with the delay it'll be more like 8 a.m. So a perfect breakfast time to start the day, then we can hit the ground running. For my breakfast, I chose to go with the vegetable frittata, and let me just say that I've got some beef with that name. It's called the vegetable frittata, and it's a little tricky because it isn't the vegetarian breakfast. Yes, the frittata is a vegetable frittata, but it also comes with a chicken sausage. Just seemed a little weird to see the vegetarian name with not the vegetarian dish. You'll also notice the ice on the window, which eventually turned to water and then fogged up the entire window on arrival. But it's doing that on the middle window pane, in flight. I've seen a million times where a window fogs up, typically after landing. I'm not sure I've ever seen it happen in flight, just made for some frustrating shots on arrival. While you guys enjoy the sunrise and our early morning arrival into Honolulu, let's talk a little about who Jetstar is, because honestly, until this flight, I didn't really know who they were, more so than that they just existed. 21 years ago, Qantas was still top dog in Australia, but a new airline was targeting the low-cost market. This airline was known as Virgin Blue, and it flew 737s on mostly domestic routes. Virgin Blue, by the way, has since rebranded as Virgin Australia, which I'm assuming more of you are familiar with. Well, Virgin Blue was proving successful in the low-cost market and was stealing customers from Qantas who were willing to sacrifice some frills for the best possible price. To compete with this, Qantas decided to launch Jetstar, which would become a wholly owned subsidiary of Qantas, operating under the low-cost strategy. Shortly before this, Qantas had acquired the regional Australian carrier Impulse Airlines. Qantas merged Impulse into their QantasLink regional carrier brand, but then undid that in order to launch Jetstar. The plan was for Qantas to be the full-fare carrier and Jetstar to be the low-cost and bare-minimum carrier. Although despite being owned by Qantas and remaining under their umbrella, the two airlines are still ran and managed almost as entirely independent airlines. They've got a number of hubs around Australia and some outside of Australia as part of their subsidiaries, and as of about 6 years ago, they held about 7% of Australia's international passenger loads. Jetstar, the Australian carrier, is still the cornerstone of the operation, but they've also launched a number of subsidiaries since they were founded. The first one was Jetstar Asia, which was launched in Singapore at the end of 2004. This bold move stole a good share of Singapore Airlines' customers craving some of that low-cost, no-frills experience. Jetstar and Jetstar Asia merged in 2006 with the goal to become the world's first global low-cost carrier. This is actually one of the main motivators for Singapore Airlines launching their low-cost subsidiary, Scoot. Jetstar then acquired Vietnam's Pacific Airlines to start Jetstar Pacific. In 2012, Jetstar Japan was founded and actually launched roughly 5 months ahead of schedule. I guess credit to the Japanese efficiency. Jetstar Hong Kong was their next plan and was supposed to launch in 2013. Unfortunately, their license application was revoked before they were able to launch. Jetstar does have a solid presence by now around Asia and Oceania, but still isn't technically in an alliance. They do offer code share with a handful of airlines. Despite working under Qantas, they aren't all One World airlines. Speaking of that Qantas and Jetstar relationship, in 2011, passengers were finally able to book continuing journeys from One World carriers onto Jetstar flights and vice versa. The only caveat? They have to book through Qantas' site. The two airlines also share a frequent flyer program, although once again there's a caveat. If you book a standalone Jetstar flight, you cannot use any One World privileges. For example, we didn't purchase the bundle with lounge access. Typically, my One World status would have gotten me in, and if I was on a Qantas flight, even in economy, that would be true. I could even get in the first class lounge. Since we were on a Jetstar flight, however, and it was not connecting to or from a One World flight, I was not able to use that status, even though Jetstar is a part of Qantas. At this point, the fleet consists of 81 aircraft, 38 destinations, and other than COVID and a random bit in 2014, Jetstar has remained profitable. They currently operate almost entirely A320s, with 70 aircraft and another 27 on order across different variants. In addition, they have the 11 787-8 for their long-haul and high-density routes. As of December 2023, Jetstar has also announced a major revamp to their long-haul 787 fleet. This revamp includes cabins designed by Recaro, and will be increasing the capacity of the business class cabin from 21 to 44, and will be adding Wi-Fi to the aircraft. No doubt this cabin is abysmal for an international long-haul business class. But remember, it's a low-cost carrier, so long-haul aircraft aren't as common, and premium cabins are even less common. That said, I look forward to seeing what the revamped 787 turns out to be. Aloha and welcome to Hawaii. Even though it may not look like a tropical paradise at the moment, I'm ready for Waikiki. But first we gotta chat about Jetstar's flight number 1, while the window condensation makes this beautiful place look like we're taxiing through a sepia filter. I gotta say that even though it's mostly a guess as to why this flight is flight number 1, I'm happy to see it here in Honolulu. Part of me wonders if we'll ever see them try to reach the mainland of the US or even out to Europe. It may not be the best product on the market, but it does allow for cheap fares, and for a lot of people, they can set aside the extra comfy, lie-flat seats, instead choosing to go for whatever's the cheapest option. At the end of the day, the cheapest possible flight typically wins, even if it doesn't have all the bells and whistles. Let's just say that there's a reason Ryanair and Spirit continue thriving despite endless memes and critiques on their services. Now, to critique what we paid for. Honestly, the airport experience doesn't feel like a low-cost carrier. Emphasis on almost doesn't feel like a low-cost carrier. We got the quick check-in queue, and then security and immigration wouldn't have mattered what airline we were business class on. The lounge is the main drawback. If you want to fork out an extra couple $100 for the more flexible ticket, you get to enjoy some great lounge spaces. If not, however, or if you book through a travel agency and maybe aren't aware of the fare classes, then you'll have to bypass the lounge and the rest of your business class product will continue on board. As for that onboard product, it definitely leaves room for things to be desired. The 2-3-2 setup of recliner seats is hardly revolutionary. It's actually fairly sad for a business class, on a full fare airline that is. For a low-cost carrier, I think it's great. I think it's an example of the fact that with low-cost carriers, you have to go into it with rock-bottom expectations, so these seats were honestly a nice surprise given the context. The seat may have been like a premium economy seat, but the service was definitely business class. From the more personal service and attention from the crew members, to the actual meal with metal silverware, we even got a great mid-flight snack menu. Now, we do have other comparisons to this product, as they aren't the only low-cost carrier with long-haul premium cabins. On this channel, we have taken French Bee's premium cabin, and there's others that have a similar concept, such as Level, Norse, and more. What I really like about Jetstar, however, is that those carriers just make it a premium experience. For some, it's the same as economy, just with a better seat. For Jetstar though, it is a true business class, just with a more budget style seat, which I'm not opposed to. The only thing I'm opposed to is leaving this trip, once again, the horrendous 787 windows. What's your thought on the 787 windows though, and also Jetstar, I guess too? Let me know. And until next Sunday, safe travels. I will see y'all next time.